Margaret had never liked hotels. They always felt cold, even when the air was warm, and too quiet, even with people moving in the halls. That night she sat on the edge of the bed, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, listening to the steady tap of rain against the window. She had traveled for a family gathering earlier in the day, but now the night stretched ahead of her, empty and still. She poured herself a cup of tea from the kettle, trying to let the warmth push away the loneliness that sometimes caught her when she was alone too long. She was used to silence, but in a strange room, it pressed heavier. Just as she raised the cup, a knock came at the door. It wasn't sharp, not hurried, but it carried hesitation, as if whoever stood outside wasn't sure they should be there. Margaret froze for a moment. At her age, she was cautious. Guests in hotels didn't usually knock on strangers' doors. She set the cup down, tightened the shawl, and stepped forward. Her hand rested on the handle, her heart beating faster than it should for something so small. When she opened the door, surprise swept through her. Standing in the dim hallway was her grandson, Ethan. He looked tired but relieved, his hair damp from the rain, a suitcase beside him. His smile was gentle but uncertain. "Grandma," he said, his voice carrying both apology and hope. "My flight got canceled. The airline gave me a room, but everything's a mess. I didn't want to spend the night alone. Do you mind if I stay with you?" Margaret blinked, unsure whether to laugh or scold him for startling her. She hadn't seen him in months, and suddenly here he was, appearing at her hotel door in the middle of the night. She stepped aside quickly. "Of course, Ethan. Come in before you catch cold out there." He rolled his suitcase inside and glanced around the room with a small smile. "I didn't think I'd end up sharing a hotel room with you. Guess life likes to surprise us." Margaret shook her head but couldn't help smiling back. She had been bracing herself for a lonely evening, but his sudden presence changed the entire atmosphere. She poured him tea and he sank into the armchair by the window, his long frame somehow making the chair look smaller. He stretched, sighed, and said, "It feels strange. One moment I was rushing through the airport, and the next I'm here. Maybe things happen for a reason." Margaret nodded quietly. She had often believed that small accidents could carry hidden meaning. The rain softened against the glass, and for the first time that evening, she felt less of the heavy silence. There was company, known expected, but comforting. Yet something in Ethan's face unsettled her. Beneath his casual tone and easy smile, his eyes looked troubled, as if he carried more than just luggage. She wanted to ask, but held back. He was young, in his 20s, still learning how to carry the weight of decisions. She remembered being that age, when the future seemed both wide open and unbearably heavy. They spoke for a while about the trip, about family, about the storm outside. But Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that he had come to her for more than just a place to sleep. There was something in the way his voice dipped at certain words. Something in the way he avoided her eyes when she asked about his plans. As the night grew deeper, Ethan grew quieter. He set his empty cup on the table and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His shoulders sagged as if holding a weight too heavy for him. Then he looked at her, really looked at her, and said softly, "Grandma, can I ask you something? Something important." Margaret's heart tightened. She nodded slowly. Ethan hesitated, his jaw tense, his hands clasped together. "You always told me to follow my heart. But what if following it means disappointing people I love? What if it means choosing something they wouldn't understand?" The question settled heavy in the room. For a moment, Margaret couldn't answer. She saw him as worry, his longing, and suddenly she wasn't just looking at her grandson. She was looking at herself decades earlier, standing in a different kind of storm, faced with a choice that still echoed in her life. She swallowed, her throat tight, but no words came. She had lived her whole life without speaking of the love she once lost. The one she had let slip away because her family wanted something else for her. Now here he was, asking the very question she had once faced. As if fate had sent him knocking on her door, not by accident, but with purpose. Margaret reached for her cup again, her hands trembling slightly. She wanted to tell him everything, but the words caught, held back by years of silence. Her lips parted, then closed again. Ethan watched her carefully. When she didn't answer right away, he leaned closer, his expression soft but serious. "Tell me your story, Grandma. Maybe it'll help me with mine." The rain had nearly stopped outside, but inside, the storm was only beginning. Margaret's heart pounded as she realized she could no longer keep her past hidden. The truth she had buried for decades was about to come to light, and perhaps it was meant to happen on this night. "I'm in this room with him." The silence stretched until it was almost unbearable. Margaret lifted her eyes, met Ethan's steady gaze, and drew in a slow breath. She knew there would be no turning back once she spoke. And just like that, the night shifted. What began with a simple knock at the door was about to open a chapter of her life that had never been told. Ethan leaned back in the chair, the soft glow from the lamp casting shadows across his face. He looked restless, the kind of restless that came from carrying something deep inside. Margaret sat opposite him, her hands folded in her lap, waiting for him to speak again. The storm outside was still fierce, the sound of thunder rolling through the sky, but inside the room, there was a different kind of storm growing, one that had nothing to do with rain. He finally broke the silence with a small laugh. "You know, Grandma, this feels strange. Here I am, drinking tea with you in a hotel room at midnight, talking about life. I thought I'd just be sleeping off a canceled flight. But instead, I feel like I'm supposed to be here. Like maybe I'm meant to talk to you tonight." Margaret smiled faintly, though her chest tightened. She had often believed in small coincidences that weren't coincidences at all. She leaned closer, her voice soft. "Sometimes life brings us where we need to be, even if it feels accidental." Ethan nodded but didn't smile. He stared down at his hands, twisting them together. "I'm glad you said that, because I've been holding something inside. And I don't know who else to talk to. You've always been honest with me, and I feel like you'll understand." Margaret's breath caught. She was used to Ethan being cheerful, the kind of young man who laughed easily. Seeing him serious, seeing the weight on his shoulders, made her heart ache. She reached over and touched his arm lightly. "Tell me," she said. "Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone." For a moment, Ethan didn't answer. His jaw worked, his brow furrowed. Then he spoke in a low voice, the words spilling out quickly, as if he feared losing the courage to say them. "There's someone I love, Grandma. I want to be with her more than anything. But my family, my parents, they don't approve. They think she isn't the right choice for me. They want me to focus on my career, on stability. But when I'm with her, everything feels right. And when I think of giving her up, it feels like I'm cutting out a part of myself off." Margaret's heart squeezed. His words hit her like an echo from her past. She could almost see herself decades earlier, standing in the same kind of confusion, torn between love and duty. She didn't speak right away, afraid her voice would break. Instead, she looked at him carefully, seeing the fear and hope tangled in his expression. He sighed heavily. "If I follow my heart, I'll disappoint the people who've supported me my whole life. But if I don't, I'll lose her. I don't know how to live with either choice. That's why I'm here, why I needed to talk to you. You've lived longer, you've seen more. Maybe you know the answer." Margaret swallowed hard. Memories stirred of Daniel, the man she had once loved. The man she let go because her parents told her to marry someone safer, someone who could provide. She had followed that path, lived a respectable life, raised children, done what was expected. But even now, all these years later, her heart still carried the ghost of the love she had abandoned. She wanted to speak, but the weight of her own history pressed down. For years, she had kept her story locked away, never admitting how deeply she regretted the choice she made. But now, looking at Ethan, she realized keeping it inside would do him no good. Maybe her truth could be the lantern that guided him through his own darkness. Still, she hesitated. Once spoken, the truth could never be taken back. Would it hurt him to know? Or would it set him free? Ethan must have seen the conflict in her face. He reached out, his hand covering hers, his voice steady but pleading. "Please, Grandma, tell me your story. I need to hear it. Maybe it'll help me make sense of mine." Margaret's chest rose and fell as she tried to gather her strength. She looked at his hand over hers, warm and strong. And suddenly she saw not just her grandson, but a young man standing at the same crossroads she once stood at. If she stayed silent, he might make the same mistake she did. And that thought, more than anything, pushed her to speak. Ethan's eyes widened. He leaned closer, hanging on every word. Margaret's throat tightened, but she kept going. So I let Daniel go. I married the man my parents approved of. He was kind, dependable, and together we built a life, raised children, had what looked like a good future. But Ethan, not a day has passed that I haven't wondered what life might have been if I had chosen love instead of approval. Her voice cracked on the last word. The silence in the room grew heavy, broken only by the fading sound of rain outside. Ethan swallowed hard, his face pale. So you regret it? All these years? Margaret nodded slowly. I do. I don't regret the family I had, but I regret losing the man I loved. I regret not being brave enough to choose him. The heart remembers, Ethan. Even when you try to bury it, it remembers. Ethan sat back, his hands covering his mouth. His eyes glistened, but he didn't let the tears fall. After a long pause, he whispered, "That's exactly how I feel right now. Like I'm standing where you once stood. And I'm terrified of making the wrong choice." Margaret reached across the small space and touched his cheek gently, her eyes soft with both pain and love. "Then don't repeat my mistake. Don't let fear make the choice for you. Love is rare. If you find it, hold it with both hands, no matter what anyone says." Ethan's shoulders shook. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against her hand, and whispered, "Thank you. I think I needed to hear that more than anything." In that moment, Margaret realized why fate had brought him to her door that night. It wasn't just about a canceled flight. It was about truth finally being spoken. About a story that had waited decades to be told, so it could guide someone she loved away from the very pain she had carried for so long. The rain outside had slowed, but in their hearts the storm still stirred. The night was far from over. And Margaret knew the hardest part of her story was still waiting to be spoken. Asterisk. The room grew quiet after Margaret's confession, but the air felt heavier, as though her words had filled every corner. Ethan sat still, his gaze fixed on her, his mind racing to absorb the weight of what she had just revealed. Margaret, for the first time in decades, had spoken aloud the truth she had buried deep in her chest, the truth of Daniel. The love she let slip away. Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to continue. "Ethan, I never told anyone about this, not even your mother. People saw my life from the outside and thought it was perfect. A good marriage, a good family, a good home. But deep inside, there was always a question I couldn't silence. What if I had chosen differently? What if I had chosen him?" Ethan leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together, his brow furrowed. "Did you ever see him again?" Margaret's chest tightened at the memory. She shook her head slowly. "No, after I chose the path my parents wanted, I never saw Daniel again. He left town. Some say he built a life somewhere far away. I don't know the details. All I know is that I stayed. And he was gone. And with him, part of me went too." For a moment, she let silence hang. The past felt raw again, as if the years between then and now had melted away, leaving the wound fresh. Ethan broke the silence, his voice thick. "So you carried that your whole life? Loving someone in silence?" Her eyes watered, but she met his gaze firmly. "Yes, I cared for your grandfather deeply, but love is not the same as contentment. Love is fire. It's wild. It stays with you, whether you want it to or not. When you bury it, it doesn't disappear, it waits. It waits for quiet nights like this, when your mind drifts and you remember what you lost." Ethan dropped his head into his hands, the weight of her story pressing on him like a mirror of his own struggle. "That's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid if I let her go, I'll live the rest of my life wondering. I'll look at the path I chose and always ask myself, what could have been?" Margaret reached for his hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. That's why I'm telling you this, Ethan, so you don't live with that question. So you don't carry the same ache I've carried. You're young. You still have a chance to choose differently. He raised his head slowly, his eyes glassy with unshed tears. But if I choose her, I'll disappoint my parents. They've planned so much for me. They've given me everything. How do I look at them and say, I choose her, even if you disapprove? Margaret's lips trembled and her voice softened. By remembering that your life is yours, not theirs. They've lived their lives. They've made their choices. Now it's your turn. And the truth is, Ethan, parents may be upset for a time, but love always finds a way to forgive. They'll see your happiness, and in time, they'll understand. But if you sacrifice yourself to please them, you'll never forgive yourself. Ethan sat back, staring at the ceiling as if trying to absorb her words. He exhaled a shaky breath. I love her, Grandma. I've tried to imagine a life without her, but I can't. Every plan, every dream, she's in it. When I think of letting her go, it feels like erasing my future. Margaret's heart ached as she listened. She saw in him the same passion she once had, the same fire she let others extinguish. She could almost see Daniel's face, in Ethan's eyes, the boldness, the longing, the fight to love even when the world stood against it. She brushed a tear from her cheek, her voice firm but tender. Then don't let her go. If you love her that deeply, she's already a part of you. Don't tear out your heart to satisfy others. It's a mistake that never heals. Ethan lowered his gaze, staring at her hand over his. For a long moment, he didn't speak, but his eyes shimmered with clarity. As though her words had shifted something inside him, finally he whispered, I think I knew the answer all along. I think I just needed to hear it from you. I needed to know it's okay to choose love. Margaret smiled through her tears. It's more than okay. It's the bravest thing you can do. The two sat in silence for a while, the sound of the rain now faint and gentle. Margaret felt lighter, as though sharing her secret had lifted a stone from her chest. But she also felt raw, exposed in a way she hadn't expected. Telling Ethan about Daniel wasn't just about helping him. It was about finally allowing herself to admit how deeply she had loved, how deeply she had lost. Her grandson broke the quiet again, his voice steady but emotional. I don't want to live with regret. I don't want to look back years from now and realize I let fear steal my happiness, Grandma. I don't think I'll make the same mistake. Margaret's chest swelled with both pride and relief. She had waited her whole life for someone to hear her truth, and tonight Ethan had. More than that, he was going to use it to change his own story. She reached up and cupped his cheek gently. Promise me something, Ethan. Promise me you'll be brave. Promise me you won't let anyone take love away from you. He nodded, his voice breaking slightly. I promise. Margaret closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in. The years of silence, the decades of wondering. The regret she had carried, a lot of it felt lighter knowing her story might save him from the same fate. Her grandson had come to her door that night seeking guidance. But in truth, she realized, he had given her something too. The chance to set her heart free even after all this time. The storm outside faded into quiet, but inside the hotel room, the emotions still surged. Ethan had found his answer, but Margaret knew their conversation wasn't over yet. One more truth lingered unspoken, waiting for the dawn. And in the stillness of the night, she realized this was no accident. Fate had brought him to her, not just to give him courage, but to give her peace she had long been denied. The storm had finally passed, leaving the hotel room quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. The air smelled fresh, as if the rain had washed away not only the city outside, but also the heavy silence between Margaret and Ethan. For the first time in many years, Margaret felt her chest lighten. She had spoken the truth she had hidden for so long, and though it hurt to remember, it felt strangely freeing. Across from her, Ethan sat straighter, his shoulders no longer weighed down by indecision. He leaned forward, his voice quiet but sure. Grandma, I think I understand now. I came here confused, but after hearing your story, I know what I have to do. I can't let fear make the choice for me. Margaret smiled faintly, tears shining in her tired eyes. Good, because love doesn't come around often, Ethan. When it does, you have to hold on to it, even if the world says otherwise. Ethan nodded, his expression firm. He reached for his phone on the table, his fingers trembling slightly as he unlocked it. Margaret watched him, her curiosity rising but her heart full of hope. His eyes scanned the screen, and then he began typing quickly. When he finished, he paused only for a second before pressing send. Margaret tilted her head. Who was that to? Ethan looked up, and for the first time that night, a genuine smile spread across his face. Emma, the girl I love. I told her I'm choosing her. I'm not running anymore. I don't care what anyone else thinks. The words landed in Margaret's heart like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. She felt warmth spread through her chest, a quiet relief she hadn't known she needed. She reached over, squeezing his hand, her voice trembling. I'm proud of you. More than you'll ever know. Ethan's eyes softened. No, Grandma. I'm proud of you. You carried so much, but you gave me the courage to choose differently. You saved me from making the same mistake. Margaret closed her eyes briefly, letting his words settle. For years, she had seen her silence as weakness, her choice as failure. But tonight, she saw it differently. Maybe she had carried her regret so that Ethan wouldn't have to. Maybe her story had lived inside her all this time for this exact purpose, to guide him. The room grew quiet again, but it wasn't a heavy silence anymore. It was a peaceful one, the kind that comes after tears have been shed and hearts have been opened. Margaret sat back in her chair, her body tired but her spirit lighter than it had been in years. She studied Ethan, his youth, his strength, his determination. She felt a rush of gratitude. Fate had given her one more chance to pass on the lesson her heart had paid dearly for. After a while, Ethan stood and moved toward her. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around her in a firm embrace. Margaret leaned into it, feeling the steady beat of his heart against hers.